Hi, I'm Matt Allen, and I'm here to share a little bit about what um, my experience is with grant funding in the NIH. A little bit about me to start with. I've got my Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Purdue University, and then after that, I did a PhD in inorganic chemistry at Caltech, and then I did a postdoc in chemical biology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then I started my independent career at Wayne State University in 2008. And in 2016, I was promoted to full professor and became department chair also that same year. So critical points in my career, I would say, probably the most critical points in my career were very, early on. So in high school, I enjoyed a lot of different subjects, and I had a particularly exciting chemistry teacher, and she was very enthusiastic and convinced me that chemistry was what I should be studying, and so that sort of got me going on the path of chemistry. And then as an undergrad at Purdue, I had to do undergraduate research as part of my degree, and I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to do research with Jillian Buriak during her first year at Purdue as an assistant professor. And I'd never seen anybody really so passionate or enjoying their job as much as she did. And that really got me interested in pursuing this job as a career. I had some outstanding mentors in graduate school, Tom Mead, and as my postdoc with Laura Kiesling and Ron Rains. And they really, taught me sort of a lot about how things work. But I would say, those formative experiences were very critical in me choosing this career path. My history of funding. So, I guess my first sort of grant, I had fellowships and things, but my first grant was the K99 that turned into the R00 when I went to Wayne State that I obtained as a postdoc. And then, when I started my independent career, I had startup funds that I used to get preliminary data for a National Science Foundation related project. And I was able to get an NSF Career Award and then other NSF awards after that, and then NSF grants. And then the K99 R00, I was able to collect enough preliminary data to obtain an R01 after that, about a year or so after that expired. And since then, I've had a couple of other R01s. I've had funding from the DOE as a co-PI and some foundations and industry. But the K99 R00 really set me up for success at the NIH, and just allowed me to collect data and to really fun science and important science. That just sounded really easy, like, oh, I got this data and then these grants. I have piles and piles and piles of projections. So really, like, there's lots of projections along the way, and each one of those projections really hurts at first, right? You pour yourself into these proposals and then they get rejected. And I guess my attitude then is to, I sulk for a day and in the pain, and then I look at those reviews and then I try and learn something from them. None of them are personal. They're trying to help me improve my proposal. No one's trained in writing outstanding reviews, and so really, like, don't take them personally. They're trying to help, and so I try and learn from each failure and improve. Okay, how I approach grant writing. So as I sort of progress through the year, and I have this idea book, I write down little ideas. So I go to a seminar, I talk to a colleague, I read papers, I read a lot of papers. I get ideas and I just jot them down, and I try and jot down the source where I got the idea from. Most of them are just like terrible ideas, but there's a few gems in there, and so a couple times a year I'll just flip through and see what's worth pursuing and what's not worth pursuing, and what I have data for and what I don't have data for. And, if there's an idea that I think is cool and significant and I want to try it, then, I find out, what data I would need to make a compelling story for this and try and get that preliminary data to write the proposal. And then I write early and I write often. So I write early as in, I'll probably start a proposal 6 months before the deadline or more even. Like it's tossing around in my head more than that. And then I'll actually start putting words on paper, maybe about 6 months in advance. And, just little aliquots. And I also write early in the morning because that's, I find that's the most quiet time for me when I'm uninterrupted. And so I can just, focus for an hour and a half, get some writing done for the day. And then if I have time to get back to it later, that's great. And if not, I've made a little bit of progress. And then I share early. So I take my drafts that are, sort of ideas that are just jumbled on the page. The hardest part, I think, is getting your ideas onto the page, and they'll look like garbage. And I'll print the whole thing out, and I'll spread this thing out on a big table, and I'll just take a pen and I'll circle stuff and move it around and say, oh, this is not good, or oh, I need to expand this, or this would transition better if it was here. And then I'll sort of put all that together, and then it's pretty close to sharing, and it's garbage at that point, right? But it's ideas on the page, and I might clean it up a little bit, but then get that out and give it to colleagues that you respect, that are going to poke holes in your ideas, because you don't want to spend a lot of time, and I don't want to spend a lot of time polishing this to make it this elegant story when there's a critical flaw in there, right? So I want to get these ideas out, have people poke holes in them so the reviewers don't poke holes in them. And then, I can modify and adjust. And then once I have this solid scientific story, then I go back and I polish and, have someone else proofread it again at the end. But, I share very early, much earlier than I'm comfortable sharing. But really that's sort of, I think, one of the things that has given me the most success is when I, am just willing to put myself out there and share my ideas at an early stage. With people that I trust. And then what I look for as a reviewer. Okay, so I've served on 5 different study sections at the NIH, a total of 9 times as a temporary member, and I'm now a regular member on the IPCA study section since July 2019, so that's a few-year appointment. And so I've seen a ton of proposals. And so things that stand out are when there's a really solid hypothesis that's being tested. It also stands out when there's no hypothesis. Things that stand out also are vague statements. Oh, we're going to take the best thing from AIM-1 and move it on to AIM-2, but define what the best is, right? So give me some specific, metrics that you're looking at, and have those based in something. They're based in, literature precedent. They're based in statistical analysis. Very, very methodical, very, logical, but don't leave the reviewers to sort of fill in the details, because they, that's not their job. Things that stand out in proposals when I'm reviewing them are independent aims and dependent aims, right? So if you can't do AIM-3 until AIM-2 is successful, and you can't do AIM-2 until AIM-1 is successful, then those are dependent aims. So, the one aim is dependent on the success of the previous aim. And if those, if there's something that goes wrong in AIM-1 and there's no, backup plan, or a poorly justified backup plan, then, what happens to AIM-2 and AIM-3 that are downstream? So really, it's a good idea, and it's hard, but it's doable. And talk to your colleagues about how to take dependent aims and make them independent. So I can pursue AIM-3 regardless of the success or failure of AIM-1. So as a whole, this grant is going to be successful. This proposal for research will be successful, and so that's another thing that I look for as a reviewer. What's the likelihood of having an impact? And then successful proposals are going to have an impact more often than not, and that's why hypotheses are so great, right? So you test a hypothesis, and you either support the hypothesis or you refute the hypothesis. Either way, it's a success because you've learned something, right? If you're saying, you know, I'm going to try a bunch of stuff and discover something new, well, you know, or build this great thing, well, you know, you might not discover anything, or you might not end up building that thing. And so testing hypotheses are a way to reduce the risk of failure. And then, you know, probably the most important thing I look for as a reviewer is, you know, is this thing understandable? So make it easy to read, avoid acronyms excessively. You know, you're writing to a few very experts, and then, you know, this panel with a diverse set of experiences and knowledge base, and you need to talk to all of them and make this proposal understandable to all of them while being scientifically valid. And so that's not an easy thing to do. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's an easy thing to do. So seek the advice of people that have done these before, and you know, get people that aren't necessarily experts to be in your early batch of people reading this and in your later batch of people reading this. You know, I like to give proposals to, you know, second year students. You know, can you understand this? And then have a conversation with them afterward. If they can understand it, people on the panel should be able to understand it. Common mistakes that I see young investigators make. So, you know, as department chair, and just, you know, being in this job for a while, I've had a chance to interact with a lot of junior colleagues, and as being on study section, I've seen a lot of proposals from junior colleagues. And so I think, you know, people not sharing drafts early enough is one thing that really is, and I feel like I've said this a lot in the last few minutes, but it's really important to share early, right? And as a new investigator, you have this tendency to say, I don't want to share this until it's perfect, because I want to not be embarrassed. I want my colleagues to think highly of me. Your colleagues will think highly of you if you give them a draft, you know, a month in advance of a deadline, right? They'll think highly of you then, right? If you're giving them this polished thing that you think is polished, you know, 20 hours before it's due, and they find a fatal flaw in it, well, then they're going to feel really bad pointing out this fatal flaw, or it's not going to be as polished as you think it is. And so really, like, get it out early. Things I see investigators making proposals, proposing too much. So these need to be realistic. If you get the word ambitious in your review, that's a bad thing. All right. So basically that means it's unrealistically large amount of stuff that you're proposing to do. So think realistically about like what you can accomplish in the 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever you're proposing, and focus on realistic chunks of proposed data or proposed experiments. You know, lacking hypotheses, going on fishing expeditions. I see that quite often from new investigators. That, like I said earlier, you know, try and avoid that if possible in your proposals. You know, and then, you know, too many acronyms, not speaking to the panelists, speaking to experts, or just speaking at a level that's way higher than you need to speak to get these things successfully reviewed. And a lot of that can be fixed by sharing this proposal early. Resources. So I've got, I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let's share screen. Okay, so I put together this list of resources that I think is really good, and so I put it on the screen here. Since this is recorded, you can have a copy of it now. At the Helm by Kathy Barker is a great book for, you know, how to think about setting up a lab and starting a lab as a new investigator. Making the Right Moves. This is free as a PDF from Howard Hughes website, and it's you know, how to, you know, sort of successfully finish a postdoc, transition into being a new faculty member, advice for new faculty members. This is a good book on advice. This one might be a little dated, but I think there's still some gems of wisdom in there. Mikichi's Teaching Tips. If you're doing any kind of teaching, this is a great book. And then The Sense of Structure. This is a great book. You know, and all of these books were recommended to me at some point when I was a, you know, junior investigator, and I've pulled pearls of wisdom from all of them. And so I think, you know, these, I have other books too, but these are the ones that I think are are most useful for new investigators setting up labs. And then tips for new investigators. I guess that's the last category here. Volunteer to review with the NIH. So, I was fortunate. I was able to serve on a study section in like my third year as an assistant professor, and it blew my mind, right? So it's this thing that, it seems like this black box, but it's, there's a process and there's a way that proposals are reviewed and approached, and just seeing that. And, I was blown away at all the things that would kill a proposal, right? And so like you just pick those up, and then you don't put those in your own proposal, right? So it's very, very useful to just read proposals, review proposals, hear discussions about proposals, participate in discussions about proposals. It's a lot of work to learn how to do this well, and that's one of the best ways that you can do that. Another tip, and I feel like I'm just going over this again and again and again. Start writing early, share early, and share often, and just discuss your ideas, discuss your drafts, share them with other people. That's going to be one of your best ways to success. And then my last tip is don't take reviews personally. None of this is personal. Successful people fail all the time. On study section, you see like people that are successful, just keep trying and trying and trying, and they get it sometimes, and they don't get it quite often. And that happens to me, that happens to everybody. So don't give up. And the proposals are meant, the reviews for the proposals are meant to help the investigators. They're not supposed to be attacking them, and they're not meant to be. And I don't know anybody that writes a review that's meant to be aggressive. I know people that aren't trained in writing reviews, and their reviews might come across as negative. And I see that in emails all the time, right? So I think 80% of conflict comes from, emails that are misinterpreted, right? So reviews fall in that same category. Whatever you think is personal is really them trying to help you, and they're pressed for time. They have more to do than they have time to do, and they're reading this stack of proposals, and they're trying to be as helpful as they can for everybody. And sometimes maybe that comes across as not, framed as nicely as possibly could be, but really the intent there isn't negative or personal most of the time. I don't know any examples where it is. I don't want to say never, because we don't want to say absolute stuff ever. But so I hope this was useful, some of these tips, and sharing my experience. And I'm looking forward to the live Q&A portion. And I apologize for having to talk to you from my house. It's COVID-19. So, all right, looking forward to the questions.